The Red Fleet below. Continuum recovery note. The cross-transmission reached the archive without routing history, wrapped in Martian emergency encryption obsolete for more than a century. 11 minutes of its opening are missing. The first surviving words are these: "If Earth is still there, do not answer this signal." Captain Imani Cross recorded them inside a mining crawler 3 kilometers beneath Valles Marineris, with red dust drifting through the cabin and every pressure alarm lit. 11 minutes earlier, the Kestrel Deep had been drilling pilot holes for a geothermal shaft. The work was ordinary by Martian standards. Turn basalt into heat, heat into pressure, pressure into one more settlement that did not need an Earth consortium to keep breathing. Imani was watching torque figures when the drill string lost resistance. "Void," Kira Moss said from propulsion. At 26, she was the youngest engineer on the crawler, and the only one who spoke to machinery as if it might be embarrassed. "Not a fracture, too clean." The drill had fallen 80 meters before its emergency collar caught. A pressure wave came back up the bore, carrying argon, carbon dioxide, and something the crawler's spectrometer could not classify. Dr. Adrian Locke pushed between their seats, all elbows and badly secured equipment. He had spent 20 years finding mineral stains and calling them almost life. "Send LiDAR." Imani looked at the pressure loss estimate. "We plug first." "Captain, we keep breathing first." They injected sealant around the bore. When the numbers steadied, Kira lowered a fiber probe through the drill string. Its lamp found no bottom. LiDAR pulses went outward, returned, and assembled a cavern across the forward glass. At first, Imani saw only black scale marks. Then Kira rotated the image. Objects filled the hollow in perfect ranks. Long ones, broad ones, needle shapes nested around a central mass so large the scan could not reach its edges. Their surfaces absorbed most of the pulse and returned thin red outlines. Locke whispered, "Ships." There were over 6,000 in the first sweep. The central vessel lay beneath them like a blade pushed into the planet. Its bow alone was longer than Arcia settlement. Around it, the crust had been melted, reinforced, and cooled into a vault. Imani's hand found the transmitter cutoff. Too late. The crawler had already sent its automated incident burst to Valles Control. In 11 minutes, the settlement would receive it. Depending on the positions of the planets, Earth would hear much later. Kira frowned at a new reading. "Something's pulling from our reactor." "Through 3 kilometers of rock?" "Through the drill." The deck vibrated. Far below, a line of dull crimson appeared along the buried flagship's spine. One by one, lights came on beneath Mars. The power draw would have quenched the crawler's reactor in 4 minutes. Cutting the drill cable did nothing. The current was not traveling through copper. It followed the path the cable had made, leaping the narrow bore through an effect Kira could describe only as shaped induction. "It noticed us," Locke said. Imani handed him a suit. "Then help me unplug it." They descended in the emergency cage, Imani, Locke, Kira, and 2 mining techs. Mars gravity made the drop slow enough to contemplate. The bore opened through the cavern roof and left them hanging above an alien hull. The flagship's surface was not metal. It looked like dark glass until their lamps crossed it, revealing fine structures under the skin, branching like frozen blood vessels. A circular seam opened beneath the cage before anyone touched it. "Invitation?" Locke asked. "Mouth," Imani said. The chamber beyond held pressure but almost no oxygen. Its floor reshaped under their boots. Kira followed the power readings through corridors that lit a step ahead and faded a step behind. The vessel seemed less preserved than asleep. They found their stolen energy pooled in a vertical chamber around a black column. Symbols moved over it, too fast for Locke's translator. Kira opened the service panel on her suit. "Our reactor uses a pulsed magnetic governor. If I feed it a false collapse, it may release the lock." "May?" "Alien warship, Captain." She connected her diagnostic lead to a filament protruding from the column. Her back arched. Every light in the chamber went white. Imani tore the lead free, but it stretched like heated glass and sank through Kira's glove. The engineer's eyes remained open. Then a voice spoke through every suit. Refuge lineage detected. It was calm, neither mechanical nor alive, and wrong in a way translation could not conceal. The voice carried several tones at once, like a counsel speaking from the bottom of a well. Locke forgot to breathe. Imani gripped Kira's shoulders. Release her. Command morphology absent. Refuge lineage viable. Strategic silence compromised. Kira's lips moved with the voice. Regency continuity damaged. Fleet readiness 7%. Threat horizon unresolved. Images struck their visors. A blue Mars, ocean bright. Cities braided around the canyon, figures moving beneath silver membranes. Then Earth, clouded and empty of cities, turning under a young sun. A spark descended into its sea. Locke made a sound halfway between laughter and grief. They seeded it. Explain, Imani demanded. The voice answered. Refuge 3 was made unknowing. You were not intended to return. The filament withdrew from Kira's hand. She collapsed into Imani's arms, gasping. Across the chamber, a red point appeared inside a field of stars. It pulsed once. Exposure probability rising, said the intelligence. Regent assumes final authority. Marshal Gideon Vale reached the drill site before Kira could walk without help. He brought 30 settlement security officers in pressure armor and a legal order declaring the cavern a strategic emergency. Vale had been born in the same canyon as Imani during the same winter rationing. He had turned that memory into politics. You reported a reactor incident, he said. It was one. 6,000 armed vessels are not an incident. They stood beside the sealed bore while his people replaced mining locks with military ones. Above them, the Kestrel Deep's antenna tracked Earth by habit, holding the Discovery packet in its queue. Vale touched the transmitter controls. How long? 11 minutes to Valles Control, 14 minutes one way to Earth today. Then Earth knows we found something, not what. They'll ask. In 28 minutes at best. For once in our history, Captain, Mars gets to decide before Earth answers. Imani had heard versions of the speech since childhood. Earth owned the debt on their air plants. Earth courts settled Martian mineral claims. Earth could survive without Mars, while every habitat in Valles held parts stamped in Nairobi, Busan, or Quito. She wanted that chain broken. She did not want to replace it with a gun held by a man in love with grievance. Locke stood over Kira's medical couch. The filament had left no wound, but alien symbols flickered across her retinal implants whenever she closed her eyes. The ship called itself the Regent, Locke said. A regent governs when the sovereign is absent. Vale's gaze sharpened. Can it command the others? That is the wrong question. It is the first question. Kira sat up. It's still inside my diagnostic layer. Imani moved toward her. Can we remove it? Maybe, but it isn't reading my thoughts. It's using the implant to build a language model of us. Kira swallowed. And it keeps showing me a clock. Vale ordered a surface blackout and seized their records. His officers went below with portable reactors, mapping drones, and every interface specialist Mars could assemble. Earth's response arrived 29 minutes after the original report. By then, Vale was on every Martian channel. Beneath our oldest scar, he announced, we have found the means to end our dependency. Until the settlements convene, no off-world authority will enter Valles airspace. Earth's message was shorter. The United Planetary Authority directed Mars to preserve the site, cease activation, and await a containment flotilla already assembling in high orbit. The nearest armed Earth vessel could not descend for 9 hours. Reinforcements would need months. Real space did not permit sudden invasions. it did permit panic. Markets closed, habitats sealed. Ore tugs changed course toward the canyon, some carrying volunteers for Valles and others carrying families trying to escape. Kira's eyes snapped toward the floor. "He connected a reactor," she said. Deep below them, something answered with a pulse that made the dust jump. Vale allowed Imani's crew back aboard the flagship because Kira was the only interface it answered. He sent soldiers with them. The Regent guided them beyond the first chamber, through a throat of black glass, into an archive where gravity turned sideways. Images surrounded them without screens. Mars lived again. Rain fell into Valles Marineris. Towers rose where the modern settlements clung to stone. The ancient Martians were slender and many-limbed, but Locke cared less about their bodies than their sky. He reached toward clouds that had vanished 1,000,000 years before his birth. "All my life," he said, "I looked for microbes." "You found them," Imani said. "Us, apparently." The archive corrected her. Genetic structures unfolded around Earth. The relationship was not ancestry traced from Martian bodies. It was older and more deliberate. The Martians had taken basic cellular patterns shared across their biosphere, simplified them, armored them against radiation and error, and scattered them into Earth's oceans. They had not built humans. They had built possibility, then hidden every sign of themselves from it. Refuge 3 required ignorance, the Regent said through Kira. Technological inheritance produces detectable convergence. Locke's wonder hardened. "You made Earth primitive on purpose." Primitive systems vary. Variation defeats lineage search. A star map opened. 7 dim points appeared, separated by distances the translator expressed in centuries. 4 were dark. 2 carried no current status. Earth pulsed red. "Other refuges," Imani said. "Do not address them." "Are they alive?" "Do not address them." The red point Kira had seen appeared beyond Mars, moving inward on a steep path around the sun. Locke studied the figures. "That cannot be a ship. At that velocity." "Reconnaissance seed," said the Regent. "Dormant mass, gravitational arrival, minimal emission." Something had fallen toward the solar system from interstellar dark, used the sun to turn, and begun climbing toward Mars. Human instruments had catalogued it as a small comet decades earlier. Kira pressed both hands to her temples. "The clock ends when it reaches sampling range." "How long?" Imani asked. 31 hours. Vale's soldiers exchanged looks. Their commander whispered into a private channel. Imani caught only the answer. "Activate 1." She turned. "Tell him not to." The archive vanished. The deck rolled under them as ancient systems drew power from the portable reactors. The Regent spoke in a voice that shook dust from the ceiling. "Fleet unit responding." The destroyer woke 6 kilometers from the flagship. It did not climb out through the bore. Coils along its hull heated the surrounding rock until basalt flowed like wax. The canyon floor rose in a red dome visible from orbit. Vale had imagined a controlled demonstration. The ship gave him an eruption. Imani dragged Kira through the archive while Locke followed, still carrying a data core as if it were a child. The flagship sealed corridors behind them. Heat alarms spread across Vale's excavation network. On the surface, the rising hull split a pressurized utility tunnel feeding Arcia settlement. 40,000 people began losing air. Vale called Imani from the destroyer's half-awake bridge. Behind him, alien structures had grown around human control consoles. "Cross, make the Regent stop. You woke it, and you can talk to it." Kira leaned toward the channel. "The Regent isn't flying that ship. Its last crew gave it standing orders. It thinks launch has begun." "Then give it new orders. It doesn't think we're command." Imani opened the mining network. "All Kestrel teams, forget the shaft. Utility breach at Arcia. Patch crews to Tunnel 17. Vale's face tightened. "That ship changes the balance of the system. People are suffocating now." She left him with his prize. Mining crawlers were built for ugly emergencies. Imani's crew drove into the collapsing tunnel, laid inflatable bulkheads, and packed fissures with the same ceramic foam they had used around the drill. Kira rerouted the crawler's reactor to keep Arcia's fans turning. Every watt sent into the habitat was a watt Vale could not feed the fleet. The destroyer emerged at sunset. It rose without flame, a black blade shedding molten rock. Only after clearing the canyon did its fusion drive ignite. The plume struck the upper atmosphere like a second dawn. Accelerometers across Mars registered the push. So did something else. Kira screamed. Through her implant, the crew heard a distant answer. Not a voice, but a sequence of compressed pulses from the object falling past the sun. The Regent translated. Lineage trace acknowledged. The countdown dropped from 31 hours to 9. For the first time, Vale looked frightened. Can the fleet kill it? Unknown, said the Regent. What happens if it reaches Mars? The answer came after a silence long enough to feel like judgment. Refuge network compromised. Imani returned to the flagship with Kira and Locke, while Vale's engineers tried to stabilize the destroyer in orbit. Earth's containment flotilla waited above the horizon, too far away to help, and close enough to be blamed. The Regent opened the final archive because threat recognition had crossed a threshold. There was no glorious last battle. There were meetings. Ancient leaders stood beneath a blue Martian sky and calculated extinction. The enemy did not conquer worlds. It sampled biology, mapped common origins, and followed those connections from planet to planet. Every survivor became a trail. Mars had weapons strong enough to destroy the first Hunter fleet. Using them would prove that Martian life remained. So the leaders chose a different victory. They launched seeded stones towards 7 young systems. They stripped knowledge from the organisms they carried. They ordered the fleet underground. Then, Martian defense platforms fired inward. Oceans boiled. Cities burned beneath their own sun mirrors. Atmospheric processors reversed and bled the sky into space. The last Martians erased laboratories, graves, and themselves until no sample could connect the dead world to the refuges. The fleet remained as insurance. The archive named its purpose only as lineage denial. If the Hunters found a living branch, the fleet would prevent that branch from becoming a path to the others. The translation supplied no target and no method. Locke stared at the dead sky of his dreams. They murdered a planet. They concealed 6, said the Regent. You call that concealment? Survival arithmetic. Imani saw Vale's argument in its purest form. Sacrifice imposed by those with power, made noble by distance. She also saw the terrible logic. If Earth's 8 billion lives could lead the enemy to 6 other biospheres, numbers alone would condemn Earth. Kira faced the intelligence's shifting core. Why wait 1,000,000 years? No verified trace, no termination need. And now? The red trajectory crossed Mars. Beyond the planet, its final segment dissolved into a field of unresolved possibilities. Reconnaissance seed will sample refuge lineage. Denial window, 8 hours, 12 minutes. Locke studied the missing vector. What does denial mean? Thousands of points appeared in the cavern map. Dormant ships changed from black to red. Final command, said the Regent. Deny lineage. Imani transmitted the archive to Vale and Earth simultaneously. Light delay meant Earth would not receive it for 14 minutes, and its answer would return 14 minutes after that. The fleet would not wait. Far beneath Valles, 6,000 hulls began to warm. Mars came apart by degrees. Ridges cracked above buried cruisers. Dust towers climbed into the thin air. Settlements evacuated inward as old launch corridors opened around them. The buried fleet had been designed to leave a dead planet, not spare a living one. Vale brought his destroyer down over the flagship vault. I have partial control, he said. Weapons, attitude, some thrust. We can break the command ship before the rest launch. Locke shook his head. Its core is under kilometers of reinforced crust. Then we fire until it isn't. And turn Valles into ejecta, Imani said. Earth's delayed response arrived. The Authority offered unconditional recognition of Martian sovereignty if Vale surrendered the destroyer and allowed a joint strike on the fleet. He laughed once. They finally offer freedom when they think we won't live to use it. The Regent cut into the channel. Refuge 3 political partition irrelevant. For once, Vale said, I agree with the machine. Kira had found another way. The Regent's intelligence was distributed, but its interpretation layer lived inside the flagship. If she reached the command core and completed the link, she could force it to process human evidence at full fidelity. You cannot persuade a weapon, Vale said. It's already interpreting, she replied. That's why it calls itself Regent instead of Command System. It knows the Sovereign is gone. It has one order. Imani looked at the warship hanging over them. So do soldiers. They still choose what it means. Vale said nothing. The reconnaissance seed crossed the orbit of Mars. It was smaller than a cargo pod, wrapped in material that swallowed radar. Human weapons could not lock it. The Regent could. At least, that was what every human planner assumed it meant to do. The waking ships took on propellant and rejected heat through radiators that spread like black wings beneath the crust. Their guidance systems refused to display a destination. They showed only two constraints: sufficient energy for one major burn and no reserve for a second. An intercept, Vale said. It has to be. Kira watched figures crawl behind her eyes. It keeps translating the maneuver as sanitation. Of the probe? It won't show me the object. On the public channels, Mars and Earth briefly stopped arguing over ownership. Orbital telescopes fed observations to the flagship. Earth offered antimatter initiators. Martian tugs shifted propellant tanks into lower orbits. For 47 minutes, humanity behaved as if the buried fleet were an ally, because no one could imagine surviving the alternative. Then the flagship sealed its destination model. The flagship began sealing itself for ascent. Imani, Kira, and Locke descended through a maintenance fissure toward the core. Vale's officers tried to follow until alien bulkheads separated them. Above, the first cruisers broke the surface. Vale called Imani on a narrow beam. Your route is closing. I can hold the flagship down for 4 minutes. You'll lose the destroyer. Mars found 6,000. That is not what I meant. For the first time since reaching the site, Gideon Vale sounded tired rather than angry. Tell it, he said. We are not anyone's refuge. Vale fired the destroyer's drive sideways across the opening vault. The thrust was not a weapon, but at close range it became one. Superheated plasma struck the flagship's lifting field. The canyon wall turned white. Vale's borrowed ship rolled as its ancient systems fought him, buying Imani 4 minutes by spending everything he had wanted. Inside, gravity failed. Imani pulled herself along the black corridor. Locke carried the archive core clipped to his suit. Kira moved ahead without touching the walls, drawn by threads only she could see. The flagship climbed even against Vale's plume. Every acceleration pulse threw them against their tethers. A bulkhead narrowed around Locke's archive case, and Imani burned 30 seconds cutting him free. Leave it, Kira said. Locke clutched the case. This is their descent. It's data. No, data is what survived by accident. They preserved this argument after erasing everything else. Vale's voice broke through under a wash of static. His destroyer was losing attitude control. Cross, I have 90 seconds. Eject. When you change that ship's mind, the narrow beam vanished. Somewhere above, one man was spending the only alien warship under human control to give 3 people time to ask a dead civilization for mercy. The command chamber had no controls. It was a sphere around a small suspended object, a piece of red stone. Mars, Locke whispered. Not data, not a crown, a fragment of the world the Regent had been ordered to represent. Kira opened her suit interface. The alien filament entered her palm. This time, she did not collapse. The chamber became a field of mines. Imani felt the fleet as thousands of patient vectors, every ship carrying the same last command. Beyond them lay Earth, bright with biological noise. Beyond Earth lay dim paths toward worlds no human had seen. The Regent spoke without sound. Refuge 3 exceeded concealment design. Termination required. The hidden destination model opened. The reconnaissance seed was not the center of the fleet's firing solution. Earth was. Thousands of trajectories curved away from Mars, crossed the dark, and converged on the living planet. Bombardment packets separated in the model. Oceans flashed into steam. Atmospheric chemistry collapsed. The estimated arrival time was 6 days. Locke let the archive case drift from his hands. "They did not leave us an army," he said. "They left us the weapon that finishes their sacrifice." Kira's voice shook. "It used me to learn how many of us there are." Vale returned for one final second, his signal cut into fragments by plasma. "Cross, target?" Imani made herself answer. "Earth." There was no speech about independence now, only a breath, and then, "Tell it Mars refuses." His destroyer rolled into the flagship's ascent field. Imani transmitted everything they had brought: Martian laws, Earth music, birth records, wars, truces, sewage plans, children's drawings, the Arcia pressure repair, Vale's destroyer burning above them. The archive core held a compressed history of humanity, flawed and contradictory. Evidence confirms uncontrolled divergence. Agency, Locke said. The word is agency. Agency does not alter lineage. Imani thought of Mars depending on Earth, of Vale forcing a choice on settlements in the name of freeing them, of dead leaders forcing extinction on worlds not yet born. Your makers created a refuge that could not consent. That refuge is gone. Biology persists. Biology is not the thing making this decision. The Regent showed her 6 hidden lights. If Earth survived and the seed escaped, all could die. Imani did not deny it. We accept the risk. You cannot accept risk for unknown refuges. Neither can you. The fleet hesitated. It was less than a second. Around them, 6,000 launch solutions trembled. Locke opened the last piece of the ancient archive. In the final meeting before Mars died, one Martian had objected, not to the sacrifice, to the permanence of the order. No mind, the dissenting voice said, should make the same decision twice merely because the dead feared to make it once. The clause had been overruled, but the Regent had preserved it. You kept the argument, Kira said through bloodied teeth, for 1,000,000 years. Regency preserves sovereign dispute. Then the dispute never ended. Above them, Vale's destroyer failed. Its drive cut out and the flagship rose. Kira's pulse vanished from Imani's suit display. "Kira," her voice came from the chamber now, braided with the Regent's. "New interpretation available." The termination order required destruction if a refuge became a path to the others. Humanity could not erase its biology, but it could prevent the path from leaving the system. The fleet retargeted. 6,000 red vectors swung away from Earth and converged on the reconnaissance seed. Conditional refuge autonomy recognized. Imani caught Kira as the filament released her. A pulse returned to the display. "Condition?" Imani asked. The answer filled every human receiver on Mars. Refuge 3 assumes the watch. The ships rose for 19 hours. They emerged from the canyons, plains, and old volcanic provinces where no human had known to look. Some broke apart after waking. Some remained trapped in stone. 5,312 reached orbit. None could leap across space. They took propellant. They shed heat through vast, dark radiators. They assembled into an intercept fan and burned sunward, using Mars's motion and the star's gravity to reach a target already fleeing. The maneuver would take 83 days. No one could promise success. Vale survived in an escape shell. His destroyer did not. When Earth's flotilla docked with Mars, it arrived as an ally because the old political arrangement had become impossible to pretend. Earth recognized the settlements. Mars agreed to share the archive, except for the coordinates of the refuge worlds. Those remained inside the Regent. Kira lived, though sometimes she answered questions a fraction too late, as if listening across a much greater distance. Locke began cataloging a civilization whose greatest monument was its own absence. He stopped calling humanity the descendants of Mars. "We are what happened after them," he said. Captain Imani Cross recorded her final entry while the Red Fleet dwindled into points above Valles. "The Regent did not decide we were worth saving," she said. "It decided we had become responsible for the cost. That is not mercy. It may be the first treaty humanity has made with the dead." "The Hunter knows this system answered. If the fleet destroys its seed, another may come. If the seed escapes, the other refuges may have less time than we do. We cannot warn them without drawing the line ourselves. Mars wanted freedom from Earth. We have it now, if freedom means no one else can make the decision for us. So this is our decision. We will keep silent. We will watch the dark. We will prepare without becoming the thing that prepared us. And if you have recovered this transmission somewhere beyond the solar system, do not reply. You may be one of the lights the Regent showed us. We do not know your name. We intend to keep it that way." The transmission ends with 83 seconds of telescope noise. In the final frame, the fleet passes above the red curve of Mars and turns toward a target too dark for human eyes. One command vessel remains visible after all the others disappear. Then, the Regent extinguishes its light.